Well, good afternoon to all attendees. Thank you for participating to this Global PS and ABS webinar. During this presentation, I'll try to cover the main trends of prices and situations that impact on Styrenics global level. Then we will look more into the price and data of import-exports and try to find out what can be the evolution of the situation of prices and import-exports in the coming 12 months. Of course, the recent events of the war are impacting very much on this trend that we don't know yet how much, but we will try to find out all this. The recording of this webinar will be shared with you afterwards, and also the presentation slides. So let's start with the introducing ChemOrbis. ChemOrbis is a market intelligence provider that is famous for the neutrality policy. So we don't take part of any direct transaction or have interest in either in producers nor in converters. Our methodology is very transparent. We interview every day hundreds of companies very active in the buy and sell transaction, and each and every price that we collect, once it's verified, we publish and share with our community. So the database of our prices is very rich, and we can elaborate them in many ways, and I will share with you some of these ways later on. What happened in 2020 and 2021? Basically, we saw at the beginning of 2020, as a result of the COVID pandemic, a complete halt of the economy, particularly in the second quarter of 2020. The polymer prices, as well as other raw materials, touched the historical lows, although they were not historical because in 2008 they were even lower, but they were just second after this financial crisis. There was, after the second quarter, in some regions earlier than others, a very strong economy recovery, and it was evident for all the world by the end of 2020. Mostly unexpected, I would have to say. As a result, the industry was not ready to supply all the requested quantities for the strong demand, and polymer and other materials became of limited supply, mostly also because at the same time we had a logistic crisis due again to COVID, because in many ports there was congestion. A lot of ships and containers were frozen for 1 month, 2 months in big ports, worldwide ports, and this was causing, and is still causing, unfortunately, a lot of delays. And of course, because the ships are sitting there in the ports, less availability of capacity of transportation, availability of ships, availability of containers. Of course, the industry has reacted to this. New ships, new containers are being built, but it takes time on top of money. The oil and raw materials increased. We saw that what's happening to the oil in these days, but during 2021, we saw that increasing oil and natural gas and other raw materials influenced the prices of polymers, not only polymers, but all materials, and prices touched historical highs. This one were really historical highs in the second quarter of 2021. Of course, because you need to buy the same or sell the same volume, more or less, double prices, this has an impact financially, or credit risks, credit lines, and so on. And most recently, we saw an issue with the energy price increase and shortage. Not only it's a problem, the cost that converters and producers are facing. You remember a few months ago, in 2021, producers started to apply the energy surcharges to their polymer prices. But in some areas, there is also a shortage of energy, so that even if you want to run your company, production cannot be done because the energy is not available. Simple as that. What are the potential issues that are with us in 2022 and maybe with us later? So first, the economy was supposed to grow at a smaller pace versus 2021. So less growth means a smaller demand growth as well for polymers. COVID, of course, still here. Unfortunately, we are not out. We are seeing perhaps the end, but there is still the menace of new variants and the spread in low vaccinated areas. So it's still there, I would say, for the whole of this year until we are completely out. And you saw what COVID created impact on logistics, created impact on economy and everything. So it's a big risk. Unfortunately, when I presented some other webinars during 2021, I was expecting the logistic problems to find a solution during the first half, by the end of the first half of 2022. In fact, the persisting of the pandemic and also other issues, not less the wars between Russia and Ukraine happening these days, is also impacting the logistics. So ports are still very congested. What is taking normally maybe 40 days, 45 days from transit to from Asia to Europe is taking 2-3 months, provided that you have the access to the ship and the container, which is not also obvious. And in fact, some producers from the Far East are considering alternative routes, for example, by rail, moving materials crossing the whole Asia, China, Russia. But of course, this has to be verified with what is happening nowadays in Russia and Ukraine. The inflation risk is still there. It was very big. It is still very big, and the oil price increase is going to make it even more serious. And we saw monetary policies in some countries suffered a lot at the end of 2021. I can bring the example of the Turkish lira, which in a few days lost more than 50% of purchasing value. You can imagine what it is the impact on the imports. Of course, they will decrease a lot. They will decrease a lot. Plus, many companies are considering the uncertainty for their future production. And of course, energy costs are rising. We will see better the forecast for oil later on. But of course, the most important issue right now is the geopolitical. You saw what's happening between Ukraine and Russia, and this is creating an impact which is firstly psychological, because OPEC assured extra supply of oil, extra production as planned, and so on. But that is not enough. As soon as it becomes psychological, I think we touched the $120 per barrel today, or we are going to touch very soon for the Brent oil. This psychological moves into real issues, because you will see the gasoline, the energy, everything will increase, so creating inflation. What is a real? And I hope that this situation is going to find a solution, a peaceful solution between the parties, so that the oil that increased so much, is increasing so much, will decrease as fast as well. To talk about oil, I have put on this graph, let's see now, more data, less talking. I have put in this graph the price of for the last 10 years of WTI and the naphtha in Europe. I compared also naphtha Europe with the Brent, but actually they don't follow the same trend, which is exactly mirrored instead with the WTI. It's worth commenting that prices here in this area, 2011, 12, 13, they were above the $100 level like they are nowadays. And then they decreased because of economic issues, and they touched in the first quarter, second quarter of 2020, the minimum because of COVID. And you see how fast they recovered, because the economy recovery was very, very strong. For PS, I have put on this chart the GPPS prices in 3 areas: Europe, which is also a local price, and the prices in China and Turkey, but they are imports. So to make them local, you need to add a little bit extra cost. But just to show you what happened, this is January 2020, this is February 2021, 2022, pardon. And you see minimums were touched in the second quarter for all the regions, and the economy recovery started even earlier in some spot market like China and Turkey, and later on started also in Europe. But you can see there is a delay between prices trends and maximum and minimum touched between Europe and the other regions, more spot oriented. It takes 1 month, 2 months for Europe to achieve the maximum, whereas it was touched much earlier in Turkey and China. And because of that, you can see also another interesting factor, that Europe prices were smaller than local prices, were smaller than Turkey and China import prices during a period of 2020. And you can imagine this has an impact immediately on the attraction that Europe has on the imports. Of course, the logistic was not yet an issue at that time, but imagine if you are an exporter, you don't want to export your polymers where there is a lower price. You export it to where you have a higher return. And in Europe, which is traditionally a higher price market, in this period, it happened the opposite. And this is also explaining partly what happened later on in Europe, because prices increased so much, because we lacked the imports, and the local supply was not enough to go after the unbalanced supply demand. The strong demand was not matched by enough supply mostly. And then you can see that during 2021, the prices started to decrease much faster in the spot markets. Europe decreased a bit later and recovered towards the end of the last year, and now decreased until February. Another thing to mention is also that the volatility, prices maximum and minimum touched during this period in China were much less, and Turkey as well, much higher volatility instead in Europe. So you suppose that Europe is a contract market and more stable, but actually is the opposite. You can have a higher volatility as well in the contract market. Let's see now the ABS situation. Again, same time frame for period, and the same 3 areas: Europe, China, Turkey. And you can see again the same situation here: Europe not attracting the imports towards the second half of 2020. So imports are vital for Europe for ABS, because there is not enough supply, and more than 20% of the demand is to be covered by imports, particularly from the Far East. And the combination during 2021 of the high logistic costs and this made everything so much more critical for the ABS prices. In fact, in Europe, they touched the maximum and in the second quarter of 2021, and stayed at very high levels afterwards, even now. Unfortunately, or let's say, one of the effects that mitigated the prices is that the automotive sector was not so buoyant during 2021. Otherwise, this situation would have been much more critical. And as you can see, in Turkey and China, prices went down much earlier because of the better supply situation in those countries. Again, there is the delay effect between spot and contract market. On this chart, I put the polystyrene price in Europe versus the styrene monomer, not spot, but not contract, but spot market. And the area in green is the difference between the two series. As you can see, there is a very tight follow-up of the trend of the styrene monomer versus the polymer price. Although in 2021, the polymer prices were distorted by the local critical supply, and therefore margins were much higher on average during 2021. I put instead here for ABS all the three monomers. On the top one line is ABS price in Europe, and here you have the styrene price, the red one. Then you have ACN and butadiene. The closest correlation, because most of the percentage of ABS is made by styrene, is strictly correlated to the monomer styrene, the ABS price, more than the others. Although butadiene and ACN play an important role, sometimes not always, they are not always in the same trend, and so one may compensate or aggravate the situation. But the most important one for ABS is the correlation with styrene, as you can see. And during 2021, the gap increased a lot versus 2020. Let's look now at the imports and exports. On this chart, you can find the last 10-year history in China, and then Turkey, and then we'll see for Europe. The blue bars are the imports, and the yellow are the exports. These are annual figures, and 2021 is a complete year. As you can see here, imports increased gradually, actually very strongly, but gradually year by year until 2020, and decrease in 2021. They increased in 2020 despite COVID, but decrease in 2021 because new extra capacities were installed and activated in China. So this gap here that you can see on annual level is because China activated extra capacities. So they are less dependent from the imports, China. Let's see now Turkey. It's a similar history because blue bars are the imports, 2011-2021. And as you can see here in Turkey as well, many new capacities were started. And as a result, Turkey is also an active exporter of polystyrene. Let's look at the Europe data. In order to focus better on what's happening in Europe, I reported quarterly figures from 2020 to 2021. It is a complete trimester, so quarter, so they are comparable data. The yellow again is the exports, and the blue is the import. You see the imports blue were very lacking during 2021, even suffering more in 2020 and 2021 first quarter were even smaller because Europe did not pick up yet the prices that were happening in the other markets. And finally, came some relief, but only limited. So import and export are now more balanced, but there is not enough import to cover the extra need that Europe has. And let's focus now on ABS. Excuse me. You can see that again, for China, 2011 until 2021, blue bars is the imports. And again, imports decreased. They stayed, they achieved the maximum in 2018, stayed more or less at the same level for 3 years. And then they decreased in 2021. Why? Because of extra local capacities startup. Imports for ABS instead increased in Turkey year after year. Record import in 2021 and no export also because they didn't invest in new capacities there. Same scenario for Europe. Blue bars are the imports. As you can see, the imports fell a lot during 2020, increased a little bit, well, a little bit, nearly the double, but still these imports are not enough to balance the supply-demand situation. So EBS price went up and stayed very high during all 2021. Now let's see at the missing volumes. Unfortunately, I don't have the same charts for ABS, only for PS and styrene. These figures here include both monomer and polymer, okay? So we have a given month, which is March 2022, and we add up, in this case, all the missing volumes. Missing volumes coming from either shutdowns, maintenances, lower rates, all what is missing is added here. And as you can see, is a very important figure, more than 1 million ton, mostly located in North Asia, China, and Americas. Europe is very little impacted by that, although there are maintenance essential shutdowns planned. The interesting thing is that for the coming months, there is less impact of missing tons, but we don't know extra few maintenance that may appear, and also the force majeure. Of course, this we cannot know. We know what happened and what will happen in the coming months, but maybe in the longer term, we don't know. Of course, we have the opposite, missing tons compensated by new capacities. And again, here it's styrene plus polystyrene. And you can see the extra capacities are added mostly in China, North Asia, right? So we take the capacity of a plant, we know when it started up, and then we divide by the 12 months, and we add month by month the new capacity. And the missing capacities here are correlated to the installed capacities. As you can see, this graph is the line, the black line is very critical, because if you remember, I said more than 1 million tons were missing, mostly monomer side, but this has a very big impact. It represents nearly 15% of the total capacities missing in March. So on top of logistics, there is also the issue of lack of supply for the monomer and the polymer. And this line instead represents the impact of new capacities on the total of capacity installed. Finally, we combine all the things, the missing tons, the new capacities, and this is the result. So the new capacity compensate only partly the loss of tons, the loss of volumes. And as you can see, the situation though is improving, but mostly because the loss capacity will disappear for the coming 6 months. So we see an improvement in the supply situation in the coming 6 months, starting from May onwards, basically. Now I want to talk to you about the price forecast. Price forecasts were introduced in ChemOrbis in January 2020. We developed a model that takes into account medium long-term factors like oil and energy futures. We take the EIA, US agency for the oil, that I will share with you shortly. The new capacity build, the seasonality, the growth of the economy, and so on. For the short term, which means for us 1 to 3 months, there are many more factors to take into consideration, but for any, let's say, situation, only 1 or 2 are the most important. And in this case, of course, is the geopolitical tension, which is leading to increases in the raw materials, the feedstocks nowadays. So we prepare a report that is made of 7, 8, 10 pages, explaining all these factors and graphs, a lot of charts, analysis, and so on. And I will show you only the end result, which is the price trends for the energy and for the polymer. So this is the energy. Of course, this is based on the second week of February. So the events that are happening nowadays are not considered in this forecast. And I'm sure the next one, which will happen in few days, a couple of weeks maximum, we will see a different story here. Anyway, at that time, the EIA published a forecast that explained that although oil was at high level nowadays, during 2022 was going to decrease gradually because of the slower growth of the economy versus 2021, and particularly the increase of the inventories. So the increase of production of OPEC and so on could match and even exceed the extra demand coming from the growth of the economy. Because of this scenario, at the time, the oil prices from WTI and Brent were seen down almost constantly, although still at high level, above $70 per barrel. Same goes for the natural gas. But this is going to change dramatically, of course, because of the recent events. In the report, we also report the spot versus contract market trend of styrene, and as you can see, for the last 12 months, the contract price of FOB in West Europe stayed always above the spot market. Just during October, November, it came very close, but nowadays is like that. And the recent closure for March is up 93 euros at 1,725 euros per ton. So you will see a sharp increase here. Actually, this trend of styrene has we don't know yet the prices that will happen in March, but the first indications are for a very strong increase, particularly in Europe. There is a question mark of the demand, if demand is supportive, but the first positioning of the major producers is to ask even beyond the increase in the styrene contract. So very, very high increase is expected in March. And this is how we were foreseeing the prices to happen in the next 12 months when we published the report by mid-February. Of course, we were seeing prices stabilizing during March and then going down, mostly on an improved supply situation. But of course, what happened, excuse me, what is happening nowadays for the geopolitical tension, the war, and so on, is completely changing this scenario. So we are going to probably see the impact of the decreased, let's say, logistics, decreased supply being aggravated by this situation, and therefore probably we are going to see an increase for the next 2-3 months probably. But we will be more precise during March to see how these factors will develop. And again, this is for Europe. Again, the price for Europe. We see that prices went up until January and started to go down, recover in February. But again, the imports are impacting a lot here. And we were foreseeing an improvement in logistics to give a better supply situation for Europe, but this is not going to happen. So we will probably, in the next forecast published in a couple of weeks, see these prices going up again for the next 2-3 months, and then probably go down if the war and so on is coming to a peaceful solution. So in conclusion, PSABS prices should decrease on improved supply in 2022, apart from this first quarter, probably second quarter uptick because of the geopolitical situation. China is a very important takeaway, is less import dependent. When China is importing less, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on Europe or other regions. The thing is that the volumes that China is not taking, they are redirected to other regions. So Turkey, Europe as well will enjoy probably an improving supply because of that. Styrene, we saw, remains a very volatile monomer. Between the monomers, I think it is the most volatile, and unfortunately, it is very strictly correlated to the polymer price. Whereas for polyolefins, we see that, for example, the monomer during 2021 didn't play an important role in setting the trends of the prices. In polystyrene, it's instead very, very important. And finally, there are a lot of risk factors to be considered during 2022. Demand is big question mark, the energy, the logistics, still big issues there. And of course, the most important one that is happening these days is the geopolitical situation, the tension, the wars that is impacting not only in a small area, but all the world, of course. So with this, I have finished my presentation, and I would like to offer the possibility for you to raise questions. You can do them on the chat. My colleagues will help me to read them out so that we don't miss any. Over to you. Thank you.
So the first question from Alain Michel is ABS. Do you see an increase of import from Asia to Europe in the next few months?
It depends of what is the definition of next few months. If it is 2, 3, 4 months, I don't think there will be any improvement soon. Maybe in the second part of 2022, yes, but not soon. There more questions?
Yes, another question from Isabella. Apparently, ABS price is related to styrene, but can you explain why the gap in recent months became bigger than before?
Yeah. Let me take the slide. Okay. This is the one that we have to look. Well, forget about butadiene and ACN. The reason why this gap increased during 2021 is because of the total unbalanced supply demand situation. Demand stayed stable or decreased in some case because of the automotive decrease, but the imports lacked a lot. So the price of the polymer followed a completely, let's say, unrelated to monomer trend. We observed the same situation also for the polyolefins. Ethylene price, monomer stayed more or less stable during 2021. And polymer prices increased a lot and didn't follow the trend of the monomer. So in this case as well, we saw that a completely unbalanced situation of supply demand is leading the polymer price away, totally unrelated to what's happening on the monomer. At least for ABS. For PS is not true, because PS was not so critical, the situation of supply demand.
Okay, another one from Isabella. Based on what do you assume that from May 2022 capacities will increase?
Let me take the... Probably, well, this graph here is the combination of the sum, algebraical sum of the missing capacities and the new capacities. So if you go back here, these are the missing tons, which we know for sure happened in the last 6 months, and the projected ones in the next 6 months. What I said to you is that for the next 6 months, we don't know the force majeures, of course, nobody can know. We know only the plant shutdowns or the maintenances. And, you know, the producers, probably we have some of them listening to us also today, but the producers have a very powerful tool to put supply and demand in balance, and that is their run rate of their production plants. If they see that the demand is decreasing, they accordingly either decrease the production or stop at all or anticipate the maintenances, or in some cases, even earlier than decreasing the production, they export extra quantities to neighbor markets. This is happening a lot in Europe. When Europe prices are going down, probably not only for polystyrene, but for all polymers, producers first try to export the extra volumes to nearby markets, Turkey, for example, or other markets, so that the balance is becoming tighter. The supply is tighter on their local market, so the prices are more sustained. So to cut it short, we know that the producers are now planning this, but they may introduce many more, I'm sure, during the coming months, particularly if demand is not picking up. So we know what is missing. We know the new capacities, and please understand that these include not only polystyrene, but also styrene, the monomer, and this making a major part here. And the sum of the two gives this result. And because we are missing less tons here, you see that in the next coming months, the situation of supply is less critical. We are in oversupply even in some regions. Right, and also take into consideration the most critical situation is in the Americas and North Asia, China, mostly. I hope I explained better. But when you see a chart like this, 15% of the missing tons impacting on total capacity is a big problem. I can tell you, it has a dramatic impact on prices. 15% of missing tons is very bad, very bad. I can tell you that. So March, April, probably we are going to see some tough movements on prices for polystyrene and for ABS probably. Next question, if there is.
Yes, we have a question from Mr. Marinis that's asking, any figure regarding graphite ABS material?
Unfortunately, all the price that we report are related to the natural grade general purpose. So we don't have specific knowledge of additives and so on, or compounds that are mostly used. The thing is that I heard though that all the situation that is happening on the raw materials for polymers is happening also for chemical intermediates, for steel, for paper, for wood, for metals in general. So I expect that what we told about ABS, natural grade general purpose, is also true for the compounds.
Question from Mrs. Legulaf. Do you have some information about isoprene?
Isoprene? No, I don't. No, we don't follow isoprene, unfortunately. We don't do rubbers in ChemOrbis. The only close is SBR, styrenic butadiene rubber, for which we have the monomers, but not the rubber sector itself. Sorry about that.
Okay, the next one from Mike Boswell. How influential is styrene monomer derived from propylene oxide production? And is this being affected by automotive output?
Very technical question. It's even too technical, Mike. I think I can investigate and let you know. I don't have an exact answer to that. I have to investigate. Sorry about that. Definitely, automotive is slower demand is impacting on a lot of sectors, and probably ABS and styrene as well. For the specific production from propylene oxide because there are different ways to produce styrene. Of course, we don't go into that detail, but I can try to find out something if I can, and I will send it to you after this webinar.
We have another question from Mr. Alain Michel. Could we consider in 2023 import from China in Europe?
For what? For PS or ABS or? Yes, probably, yeah, because China is importing a lot of ABS. I don't think so. No. China is producing a lot of styrene and polystyrene, but it's mostly for their own consumption. That is same is happening for polyolefins, for example, for polypropylene particularly, but whenever China exports, they export to nearby markets. So the first markets will be Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and so on. I would say before you can see exports touching Europe, like we see, for example, for PET. PET is since long exported from China to Europe. We have to see a tremendous extra capacity there, which is not the case for polystyrene. They are still big consumers. So not soon for Europe to see imports from China. And if there are exports out of China, it will be only for the neighbor markets mostly.
A question from Mrs. Zanetti. You mentioned styrene price will increase in March. Do you think with the geopolitical situation, the increase will be even more?
Oh yeah, probably, because of the oil situation first, which is supporting the general sentiment of the market. So I heard already some major producers asking, usually the styrene, like for ethylene, the styrene increase or decrease is transferred immediately to the current month polymer prices. In this case, and in some cases also in the past, but in this case, the majors asked even more, a gap. So it means that this situation here of lack of supply combined with the geopolitical tension is tremendous impact. And only if there will be a very, let's say, weak demand, which at the moment is not there. So demand is stable, I would say. Actually, many people didn't purchase much in February and so on because they were hoping to see prices go down. And this didn't happen. So they might go after extra volumes to reinstate their stock. Plus, of course, what limited the purchase in the previous months is also that prices are very high. So a very high level, you don't want to build stocks. But nowadays, even these inflated levels are becoming interesting. So we might see even a supported demand in March and April, even that just out of the let's say fear of becoming not finding enough supply or lack of polymer in the future, just to be on the safe side.
The next question is from Mr. Isaac, that's asking, for the time period after May 2022, which region do you think has the most risk in terms of supply-demand criteria? Thank you.
Of the regions that we follow, well, I think if you look at the missing tons here, I would say Northeast Asia and Americas. But let's say Europe is also balanced, more balanced than these regions. But I would say that there are criticalities also in Europe, because Europe, particularly for ABS, is very dependent from the imports. So critically, in the coming months, the supply situation should be more critical in Northeast Asia and Americas, but Europe is also not, let's say, without any concern.
No more questions for now.
Okay. Very good. So thank you to all attendees who joined this webinar. I hope you find it is useful. We will share with you the presentation, the slides, and the registration of this webinar. And you are